Welcome back, everyone. Today I want to close out our coverage and do our review of this Trendnet Mini USB-C docking cube. Now this is a fun little device. It takes USB-C in, gives you a couple of USB 2.0 Type A's, a USB 3, HDMI, and Ethernet. Now most of this has worked perfectly fine. I haven't had any issues with it actually performing any of these duties, but what I have run into is just a couple of letdowns on the power capacity on it. So it comes with this AC adapter, and this is a 5 volt 4 amp, so it's a 40 watt adapter. And of that, as far as I can tell, we're getting about 1 amp out the USB-C port. So that means it'll charge my phone. It can charge a Chromebook. I tested it with my daughter's Chromebook, and it actually seemed to do fine there. But it's not going to charge most USB Type-C laptops, especially any that really need 40 watt charging or have some of the larger Intel CPUs that you actually need like 85 watts. There's just not enough juice there. And I asked Trendnet, they said, don't plug it into a bigger AC adapter, you'll melt your cube. So that leaves us with a couple of things. For one, this would be a great little cube to have in my briefcase, and I've traveled with it a little bit like that, and it works fine. It can be powered by the USB-C out on my laptop or my ThinkPad and give me another Ethernet jack or some more USB ports, whatever it needs to be. But if I was doing something where I wanted more power out on the USB ports, and that's part of where that 40 watt power budget goes, is to feeding these ports, I have to travel with this adapter. And it's not inherently the size of the adapter, it's, well, I guess they don't come off. Oh, there we go. It's these pins that don't fold in that are suboptimal for that. And let me grab an example. Now, neither one of these is rated for a full 4 amps. These are both 1 amp adapters. But either one of these particular designs, this happens to be a Bose headphone charger where the prongs fold in sideways. And this is an older HTC phone charger where once again the prongs fold. And this is even part of the reason this HTC charger is as big as it is because it was region non-specific. It is 100 to 240 volts in, so these were replaceable based on whatever region it happened to be in. So I think they wouldn't even have to change anything on the cube. They would just have to get a different power brick to make it a much more appealing device as far as being able to travel with it's concerned. Now, obviously you don't just want to hear me talk about it, you guys want to see it in action. So we're going to take advantage of our new Viotech panel here, which has been in my briefcase lately because it is a handy thing to have. And I'm going to actually drive it with Alright, let's plug it into the USB 3 port. Alright, so, and right there we just saw the difference between USB 2 and USB 3. USB 3 actually can deliver more power. And this panel was trying to load in at 100%, that's volume. 100% brightness, and the USB 2 ports just weren't delivering it. That's not Trendnet's fault. That's I think I left the panel at 100. It at 50%, the phone or one of the USB 2s actually is enough to drive this panel. But anyway, you saw that the panel didn't light up the second I plugged the Trendnet in, whereas if I had plugged it in just to a straight USB power source, not that either of these would have been quite enough, it would have lit up. And one of the things that really caught my attention with this Trendnet cube was that I've got my Sound Blaster K3 Plus here that I use in the studio, and that's hooked up to my camera. And there are times that I want to not necessarily use my main camera, but I want to plug it into a laptop and get audio out. And I was thinking, if I plug the Trendnet in, and the Trendnet drives the K3, well, the Trendnet's also a hub, and I'll be able to power my mixer for my camera and plug it into my laptop and actually record both analog through the analog interfaces and digitally. Which, that's less cables to move around if that would just work that way. So, it doesn't power anything without a host, which is a bummer. There are other devices that do. That Zendur adapter that we looked at the unboxing of probably will have gone live a week or two before this. Actually does do what I want it to do. I can plug in my laptop to its USB Type-C port and then pull the audio that way and treat it like a USB hub or a power source. And that's not Trendnet's fault. I don't think that was really a use case when this thing was designed, and I'm really an edge case there. The odds of actually wanting to power USB devices without having something plugged into a hub like this are pretty slim. I would like to see an always-on USB port added to it in the future, because, obviously this was never designed for high-capacity docking stations or anything like that. And we do, or to compete with high-capacity docking stations. This is like a $50 cube. It's not $100 or $200 like some of the Thunderbolt docks that we've seen and demonstrated. So it's just completely different market segment. This is meant to expand the capabilities of a Chromebook, of a cheap laptop, something that only has a couple of USB ports on it. And it does so quite well. It's just not quite perfect. And that's why products have revisions. This is literally revision 1.0. So hopefully in the future, maybe they don't even make a new revision model of it. We get a better power brick. Something the size of this HTC brick is not arduous to have in a briefcase, and would work fine. In fact, maybe they don't even need to give it a new power brick and bother designing one. It's a USB-C device. They could take USB Type-C in and then have 60 watts available to them just using whatever laptop charger people are using. So that's certainly an option there. The USB 2 ports work fine. I've plugged keyboards, mice, flash drives into them. For the sake of completeness, let's plug a flash drive into one right now, and Android will do its thing and pick it up in a second. The Ethernet jack works. It is Realtek, and Realtek USB Ethernet. It performs just as well as most gigabit Realtek USB devices do, which is to say that it's functional. It's not terrible. It's not my favorite device. Realtek devices tend to be a bit of a headache for me in a corporate environment, but for USB docking stations and port replicators and things of that nature, it's really all I've got. There is no Intel USB attached Ethernet that I've seen. And although some of the higher end devices will have Aquatina cards, those tend to be multi-gig, they tend to be Thunderbolt, they tend to be another $100 on top of already cheap or already expensive devices. You can spend $150, $200 on a standard USB-C docking station or low-end Thunderbolt docking station, then tack another $100 on just to have a 10G base T port there provided by an Aquatina chipset. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So this cube, $50. Where does that put it? Well, I like it. It does a lot of things that I like. It doesn't quite fit the needs that I wanted it to, and that's not its fault. That's just not what it was designed for. Now, for students at home, for people with Chromebooks, you know, especially with where we are, a lot of the remote school telecommuting and things like that, this is actually not a bad little cube. And it, you know, it is charging my phone. It's doing so slowly, but can I bring up Ampere? Great ad there, guys. It's doing so slowly. It's going to measure it in a second here. But it is charging, so I'm getting about half an amp. I think I've seen it peak at about a full amp out to my phone. I'm sure some of that depends on what USB devices aren't plugged in. There it is, 6.9, or sorry, 0.77, 0.84 amps. So it'll charge a phone about as quickly as your typical 1 amp charger, and for some Chromebooks, that's actually enough to sustain them and charge them when they're off. Like I said, my daughter's got, I think it's an Acer Chromebook. It's one of the lower end Intel-based models. And it was perfectly happy to run its screen, and the battery didn't drain, and keep going at whatever output this cube could give it. Now, I'm sure if I had put it under 100% load and crammed video playback while it was... I mean, I don't even know if you can do a video export on a Chromebook. I was about to say video export because that's the kind of torture test I do on a PC, is have it export a 4K video while it's playing things on a web page and make sure that it's using GPU encoding on the export so I can really peg the CPU and the graphics card. I don't think I can do that on a Chromebook. But that's besides the point. The light normal usage that she was doing during a day of class, this output enough power. A little bit more probably would have been welcome, but this was capable of outputting enough power there, driving a second monitor. I had the option for wired Ethernet, although I didn't use it. Doesn't really need it for what she's doing. So, it's a versatile little cube. I think is a victim of its own price point. So, yeah, we'll bring it up on the screen because we can. This is a Trendnet cube. There it is. All right. So, $59.99. Supports 4K. Actually does do 4K. I tested it. I was able to get 4K 30 out of it attached to my large monitor. The only reason we're not seeing that in the studio is I don't want to drag it in here. So $59.99. That's about half what other USB-C docking stations I've seen are capable of, or that's about half of what other USB docking stations I've seen cost. So if the biggest downside to this is that you need to still plug in a separate power source, that's not bad. Because I've bought $100 display link driven USB docking stations for years now for devices that predate USB-C, and the first party docks were $300, $400, $500. So we would get those. And this doesn't provide quite as many USB ports or some of the other features that those might have, like multiple video outs or audio jacks. But it's got 3 ports on it, which, honestly, keyboard, mouse is all people ever plugged into them in the office. And most people were only single monitor. And if you really did need audio jacks, you can always get a USB audio device. This is a cheap one that I think costs like $4. And if I plugged this in here, I don't know if my phone will support it, but it'll work. And I've got a bunch of these because the laptops that we had actually had crap audio chipsets in them. And even these little 16-bit Tinker Toys, this one's a Sabrent, were better than what was built into some of those laptops. So, $60 and the odd audio adapter for the person who needs it. Keyboard and mouse, some people would plug in their phone to charge. The USB 3 port would handle that just fine. You're done. And this doesn't require an additional software package. It's just HDMI via DisplayPort. Well, HDMI via USB Type-C, which means that this is probably doing an internal DisplayPort to HDMI conversion. Although I'd have to tear it apart, and there's no screws anywhere to see exactly what kind of chips it's using for that. So, doesn't need any drivers. If you've got, some of these cheaper laptops now have 2 USB-C ports on them. Well, you'd still need to plug in separate power, but this will do most of what you want, as long as you only want one monitor. And if you do need more than that, we've looked at some OWC docks. They're $150 typically. This is not even in the same class as this Trendnet Cube. It's bigger, it costs more, it has more ports, it does provide power, and it's just not. This is somebody who's got 2 USB Type-Cs, maybe 3, on a laptop, and they just need to plug in a couple of things, a keyboard, a mouse, a monitor, and they're happy. This is someone who is going to use the SD card slot, is potentially going to use that headset jack, is going to plug in a lot more things. They're going to plug in a printer, they're going to plug in a keyboard and mouse, they're going to plug in multiple, actually this is still only single display, but they're going to plug in their display via DisplayPort. They're not going to plug it in via HDMI. It's just completely different market segment. This will set you back $150. This will set you back $50. Students with Chromebooks, people with low-end laptops, offices, you know what, you buy a cart full of these and everybody's happy. That's really where the Trendnet Cube ends up. And I'm sorry that, maybe that doesn't sound like a clear-cut answer. It's not a glowing recommendation. It's not a don't buy this thing. It is a, if you fit the use case for this device, this is what you're looking for. And that's really where it ends up. Anyway, there'll be a link to the Trendnet Cube in the description below. There'll also be a link to Trendnet's website. As well as some of our coverage on this larger OWC USB-C dock, which, you know what, if you are in the market for a bigger dock that's going to charge a larger laptop, isn't a bad choice. My only complaints with the OWC dock have either been addressed or are solved by some of their larger models. It's still only a single display out, but they got rid of the HDMI model. They now just have a combined model that covers both use cases, and they include a mini DisplayPort to HDMI dongle in the box. I can't even guess at how much money that saves them, not having to make 2 completely different products and to just include a $5 dongle and be done with it. Because, I mean, if it costs me $15 or $20 to buy one retail on Amazon, I can't imagine it costs them more than $5 to just put it in the box. Anyway, enough with that aside. Trendnet Cube, like I said, if you're the right market segment, this is actually a great deal for this type of device. If you aren't, unfortunately, it just isn't quite going to do all the things that we expect out of larger docking stations. And at a third the cost, and I'm going to say like a fifth to a quarter of the size, there's no reason that we would think that it would. I would like to see some of the comments that I made addressed in a future revision. I would like a more compact power adapter for it, or to just use USB Type-C power in the first place, which could also potentially let it charge some larger laptops. But anyway, closing out, I want to thank Trendnet for sending in the cube for review. I want to thank our patrons as well as anyone who helps support us by using our Amazon affiliate links. It is support like that that makes videos like this and others possible. I want to thank Alextrix for providing our opening and closing themes as always. And finally, thank you for watching.